prayed. We just talked to Jesus. I believe he's got it. So here's the title of my message. We're only today going to cover verses 1 through 11 of chapter 4. But my kind of title of the message is Living for God and the Reality of That Life. Living for God and the Reality of That Life. Lauren, I do have 2 slides and then questions, except I think I need to delete the last question because, like I said, I cut this short. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read verses 1 through 6 and then 7 through 11, and we're just going to get into it. But before we do, just a quick reminder of the context here, right? So as a Bible teacher, like one thing I just constantly get after you guys about is that if you don't understand, I mean, hopefully y'all could repeat it at this point after me. If you don't understand what you're reading, when you're reading it, and why you're reading it, you won't understand how to apply it. You won't. I think that's why there's such misconstrued ideas about the Bible nowadays. You've got these prominent voices on Instagram and TikTok and stuff that like hate on the Bible, and yet they don't know how to read it. So how can we listen to people like that? So it's important what we're reading and why we're reading it, all right? So just a quick reminder of the context. Peter, throughout this letter, and he has 2 of them, is writing to the persecuted churches. Not just one church. A lot of Paul's writings were to a single church, right? So it was to specific people walking through specific problems with specific things going on. Therefore, the applicability, if you will, I don't know if that's a word, is sometimes limited to what you're going through. And that can be helpful to us in certain seasons. Peter is different. Peter is written to any faith-filled person walking through people pushing back on their faith. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you at any point in your faith walk with Jesus, whether you're brand new to this or you've been doing it, have experienced people push back? Experienced people not believe what you believe? Experienced people even persecute, if you want to use the P word? Okay, this is for you. This is for you. The church here that he's writing to is being pushed back and persecuted and going through struggles and all these things as it grew and multiplied. One thing I love about our struggles and our persecution is that's never changed how fast the church has grown. If you didn't know this, Christianity is the biggest religion on the planet by about 1 billion people. Yeah, so our gospel, which is one of the newest gospels, is by far the most popular, and I would argue because gospel means good news. When people are given good news, they like it. I don't think many other faiths are really good news. I don't like hearing that a faith tells me I have to do a bunch of stuff to earn their God to love me. That doesn't sound like good news. That sounds sucky. And yet our faith is called good news, and I think that's why it spreads the way it does. And what we're reading here is when it was spreading like rapid fire. It was spreading like rapid fire. So let's take that context kind of into our souls right now, and then let's read what Peter had to say, starting in verse 1. Therefore, and this is a follow-up from last week as Peter closes chapter 3 and says that Jesus Christ did his thing and he's gone into heaven. He's at the right hand of God and he's with angels and authorities and powers, and all of them are in submission to him. That's kind of crazy. And Peter says, therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves with the same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. As a result, they do not live the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. For you have spent, listen to this, y'all, for you have spent enough time. I can't imagine he's not being authoritative right here. For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, carousing and detestable idolatry. The same people he's now talking, they are surprised that you do not join in their reckless and wild living, and they heap abuse upon you. Oh man, let that be a relief to someone in the room who has experienced abuse because of what they try to walk in. But they will have to give account to him who was ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is the reason the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to human standards in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the spirit. I'm going to stop there for now. So Peter here is encouraging these individuals, and I think by extension you and me, right? He's encouraging these individuals that what they're going through, these sufferings, these hardships, these persecutions for what they believe. So let's just pause. If you're in the room and you think you're walking through a hard season, okay, half of you I've talked to in the past month, and that does, cover how you feel right now. And that's not a discounting of how you feel. That's to make you feel like you're not alone. I need somebody to hear that in the room. This generation, I feel like more than ever, it's so weird. You're the most connected generation and the most lonely generation. You have the most access to everybody, and yet you're more isolated than anybody. This generation goes outside less than ever before. That's not a knock on anybody. It's just the truth. It's the truth of the matter. And yet, amidst that connection, we're the most alone. And I wonder why, and I think as we look at this, these sufferings, these hardships, these persecutions, maybe whether or not it's for our faith, we can probably, many of us, if not all of us, identify with that. But what I love about Peter here is he doesn't do what Instagram does for you. He doesn't do what the culture does for you. He doesn't give you this false sense of security that doesn't come from anything real. He doesn't say things like, it's going to be okay. I'm praying for it to stop for you. I know it's hard right now. That's the worst, and I'm really sorry. He doesn't say anything like that. He says someone who suffers for Jesus should actually celebrate because it shows they're rejecting sin in their life. Now, my third point that was going to be this, but we're not going to go to it anymore tonight for the sake of time, is it was going to be we need to redo our view of persecution. We need to redo our feeling of hardship and suffering. And maybe just for the sake that now I'm realizing that was probably a valuable point, but I cut it. If we walk through life constantly a victim, you will lose. I hate victim mentality. I hate it. If everybody did everything to you bad all the time and that's how you're just going to live, guess what? You're always going to feel like everyone's out to get you. And yet, people in life that I look the most up to are the ones who conquered the worst situations because they knew who they belonged to. Man, if I don't belong to people who think they can do bad things, and listen, that could be someone really important in your life. It could be. And for some of you, it is. And also, it could just be a friend who made a bad comment on social media to you and made you feel bad about yourself. I don't know what you feel like holds you back and makes you feel bad about stuff, but if you live in this victim mentality that everything's against you, then everything will always be against you and you'll never win. Why? Because you're not walking in victory. You feel like you've been handed loss. The follower of Jesus is handed nothing but victory in the worst circumstances. Peter is not writing to people going through good situations. He's not writing to people who got the job and who have great relationships and whose mom and dad were exactly who they were supposed to be, and not the person whose future is figured out, not the person who has the greatest boyfriend or girlfriend. He's not writing to any of those people. He's writing to the people who have none of that. And he's saying, hey, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. I know you've suffered. I know you have hardships. But listen to me. If you stand for what's right, you will actually celebrate in your sufferings. I just want you to think about this in your own head. Have you ever had someone in your life who's going through a really hard time and you look at them and you're just like, how are you doing that? How are you so strong in this? How are you so strong when they walked away and they shouldn't have? How are you so strong when these material things you worked for are gone in a second? Sound familiar to any of our brothers and sisters in the room, a.k.a. Michael and Susan Benna? Have you talked to them in the past 2 weeks? They're thriving. Why? I'm not trying to abuse their circumstance. I've talked to them about permission in this. They are thriving because they were not rooted in a house. They were not rooted in their stuff. Some of you right now, I love you to death, and I might fall into this in some ways too. If everything burned down in your life, either physically or metaphorically, you would be ruined. And that does not have to be your reality. So where are you with that? If the things you care for most were to disappear tomorrow, how would you be? And do you see people in your life who can lose everything like this, but realize they already had everything? Man, that's what I came here to preach every day of my life. And when we've hit that place where we're celebrating, because sometimes suffering and rejection from the world and like persecution from people who feel certain ways about us, like when we've hit that place, Peter actually says it means you're no longer living for the world. That's what it means. It means you've achieved something. And let me prove that. Because if people are rejecting me and pushing me out and I'm losing friends, which, by the way, in college I did a lot of that. Like, oh my goodness, a whole bunch of that. I didn't realize this at the time, but looking back, God's telling me here I was achieving something. I was achieving something. I was actually like, sin was losing against me. Oh man, do you want to be somebody who devil and sin? I don't even call him the devil. He doesn't deserve a pronoun. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, don't get me started on pronouns, but he doesn't deserve a pronoun. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't deserve that. I want to be someone who he looks at me and he's like, bro, I've been done losing to you. I've been done losing. I don't know where you at with that. And then I just love this. Peter says this. He says, you've spent enough time in the things of the world. And that's where my first point is. I'm so glad I cut the third one, actually, now that I think about it, is this. Claiming faith while following the world is a waste of your life. Claiming faith while following the world is a gigantic waste of your life. I'm going to read a quote from David Guzik. He's one of my favorite Bible breakdowners. He runs a commentary called Enduring Word. It's one of my go-tos. It's one of my go-tos. He says this. Peter realized that we've all, so that's all of us, me, everybody, we have all spent enough time living like the world. Now we are called to live like Christians. It is a profound and foolish waste of time for Christians to live like the world, and we must simply stop being double-minded and start living as Christians. Sadly, many Christians, in their heart of hearts, think that they have not spent enough time doing the will of the ungodly. They want to experience more of the world before they make a full commitment to godliness, and this is a tragic mistake and takes a path that leads away from eternal life. How many people in your circles at your age have you watched who are like, I just need to experience other things? Maybe I was raised in the faith and I just want to go experience this, and they never come back. It's almost like God told us from day one that could happen. Man, this is why listen to me, this is almost a mission for y'all. You need to be like loving and firm with your friends. You need to be. Man, don't be those dudes and girls that are like, yeah, I mean, go do what you want. Oh, cool, yeah. I might not come with you, but like, or I will come with you. I mean, I don't know what it is for you, but listen, I watch y'all. I follow y'all on Instagram. I'm not dumb. I be doing this stuff, all right? And what are we entertaining? Who we for? Who are we against? And listen, I'm not talking about humans. The Bible's clear. Our battle is not against humans. It is against the authorities of the devil in spiritual realms. That's who we're fighting. I would encourage you guys, when you're in circles that they're doing this, that, and the other, speaking this way and the other, they're standing for stuff that you know we shouldn't be standing for, they're doing things that you know we shouldn't be doing. What would it look like for you to listen to me, excuse me, your pastor's about to say this, nut up and stand for something that actually matters? What would that look like? To not care what other people think. Because Peter's being clear here. I mean, he's being so clear that, listen, hey, actually, we're about to get into it, but they're going to be judged for what they do, and you're going to be judged for what you do. So you choose right now who you want to stand for. I don't know what it is for you, but he knows what it is for you. If you aren't convinced about the fact that you aren't missing anything by avoiding the world. Now, I'm not saying avoid like the people in the world. I'm not saying like we're in the world but not of it, that type of deal. You know what I'm saying? You have no choice but to walk through this life. You have no choice, okay? It's a beautiful choice, by the way. But like, look at your leaders in the room. When I was prepping this message, all my leaders just popped right from Ben and Lauren Walker. Look at Lauren Walker for 2 seconds. Everybody just look at her. Look at her. Does that woman, have you talked to her for 2 seconds? Does she look like she's missing anything by not living for the world? No. In fact, her whole testimony is I was living for the world at one point, and I found true life elsewhere, and now she's as vibrant as ever. Look at Ben Walker. My dude is so wise and humble and just loves people. And is he missing out by not going and getting wasted every other night? Is he missing out by not having sex before marriage? Oh, my gosh. Is he missing out by not watching porn every day? Who am I talking to? It's okay. It's okay. No judgment here. This is not a place of judgment. This is a place of Holy Spirit conviction. And conviction solely means he loves you. Oh, if you feel the Holy Spirit convicting you, that means he loves you because he doesn't want the garbage in your soul you've let live there. I look at Brian Bush, who's not even here tonight. My dude loves Jesus and leads a huge business. He's not here tonight because they're launching another restaurant. If you think you're missing out on something by not being a part of the world, you have been lied to left, right, up, and down. You should delete every social media and drop half your friends. I don't know, man. I don't know who needs to speak some life into you right now, but true life is only found in Jesus. Look at me. I wasn't even going to highlight me, but I'm deciding that right now. I'm thriving more than I have in my whole life, bro. I'm launching a conference, bro. I played semi-professional sports, all right? I got a beautiful family and a hot wife. You know what I'm saying? And listen to me. I don't need that stuff. I don't know. What are you looking for that you're looking for in the wrong place? Peter's being clear here. You do not need that. We need to stop being halfway. There's stuff you got to drop. There's stuff you got to get rid of. So what we should be doing actually as believers is aiming that, this is in verse 4, I think, aiming that people are surprised when we have no interest in acting like them. I will never forget my college years, your age, when I stopped going to the parties, the ones I used to run, the ones I was throwing keggers. And I not only stopped hosting them, I stopped going to them. And I'll never forget, I have a bunch of examples, but I had one friend, his name was Darren. There's no chance that he's going to watch this, and if he does, praise Jesus, Holy Spirit, do your thing. And he came to me, and he said, man, you changed. And I said, I know. And he was like, I hate it. Like, I think he used an inappropriate term, to be honest with you. I'm not going to share that right now. And I just remember, like, we left not on good terms. I don't think it was my fault. Have not talked to him a single time since. But I'll tell you, it's because he was surprised that something was different. Does anybody look at you and think like, oh, my gosh, why are you different? Why has stuff? I'll never forget when I got engaged. When I got engaged, at this point, I was just out of college, and I was working in a secular workplace in chemistry, so nobody believed really what I believe. And I remember dudes, I mean, I'm not talking, it had to have been 3 or 4 different people who were like, you going to a strip club? Dude, you're engaged. That's what you do. Like, it's your last hurrah of freedom. And I remember being like, no. Why would I go to those? What? That's dirty, y'all. What you talking about? And I remember people being like, wait, what? That's like what you do, though. That's what you do. That's the world. And are people surprised by you saying no? Or do you not say no? But this brings me back to verse 4, like I mentioned specifically, where it says they're surprised that you do not join them in this list of things. Here's a little take home for you. Holding on to Jesus will involve the release of other things. Not can, not should, it will. If you want to hold on to God and Jesus and your faith in your life, you cannot hold him with a full hand of other stuff. You can't. I made eye contact just now. I'm not going to look back, but I made eye contact now with people who I've walked through this where they weren't willing to give up something, and now they're rid of it, and they know Jesus better than they ever did. You can't hold on to Jesus with a full hand of other crap. You got to start releasing stuff, and verse 4 is clear about that. He's making it just uber clear. We've spent enough time doing things non-faith-filled people do, and he defines it as a waste. The New King James Version, if you're not like convinced yet, like this version calls it reckless and wild living. The New King James calls it a flood of dissipation, which directly translate to wasting your time. It's saying that this type of living for the world and wanting people's approval and doing what they do so you feel good and feel like you have love, that you never needed that love anyways, it says that it's a flood of wasting time in your life, which is ever so short to begin with. So let me ask one of my favorite questions to ask people: how are you spending your time? How are you spending your time? Oh my gosh, y'all. If you watch 20 hours of Netflix a week, it's not cool. If you play video games nonstop, it's not cool. If you are on your phone 9 hours of screen time a week, that's what this is talking about, okay? If you get on Instagram 14,000 times a day to check how many likes you're getting on something, this is what they're talking about. If you get on the beach and you gotta take a picture posed a certain way so people feel a certain way about you, that's what this is talking about. Do you blend in with the culture or do you stand out? And do you realize one is a waste? You can waste your life if you want. Oh my gosh, one of the visions of the Grove is to empower young adults to go be leaders and not waste their life. I'll give you a book by John Piper called Don't Waste Your Life if you want it. I have like 5 of them, and I'll order you more. Like, there are generations of people recognizing that young adults waste their life with garbage. Because we watch it, right? When we get older, man, I'm 30 now, y'all. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to close with this last section and point, verses 7 through 11. 7 through 11, it says this. The end of all things is near. So he almost like, hey, all the stuff I just said, the things I think you should step out of, the things I think you should invest in, is because, verse 7, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Another version says, for the sake of your prayers. We're not going to go there tonight. Verse 8, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks with the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides. You have people in this room who serve with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. I'm sorry, but if you read verses like this, 7 through 11, and you somehow know somebody that says God is a God of judgment and wrath and all this other stuff, which in some ways he is in a healthy way, but like these verses are all over the place. Dude, go love people. Be hospitable. Serve others. Dude, the number of verses in the Bible that say things like this versus smite thee is just insurmountable, one to the other. So if people in your life are like, oh, you know what I'm saying, just be educated, you know what I'm saying, and don't stand for that junk. But in typical Bible fashion, this follows a challenge with what to do about it. It challenges us in the first 6 verses, and then it tells us what to do about it. I'm going to break it down into 5 things that it says. I'm just going to list them right now. So what do we do about the fact that we should not be living for the world? There's things we need to release. There's things that we have to stop following in order to fully hold Jesus. And what do we do about it? The first thing is pray. Verse 7, pray. Like, oh, I love this. I read a commentary, and being in a part of church culture, which probably about 50% of you, I would guess, are pretty in-depth in church culture, and some of you aren't, and that's beautiful either way. Like, deciding when Jesus is going to come back is like a very prevalent thing, and it's like every other month, and there's always calendar reasons, and well, this politician was elected, and now Jesus is coming back, and then it's never happened, you know, and it's kind of embarrassing at times, to be frankly honest. And I love the commentary I read about this that said a sense of the times shouldn't lead us to post more, it should lead us to pray more. You really think Jesus is coming back soon? Oh, that's amazing. The Bible tells you to pray more, not post more. The Bible tells you to pray more, not be annoying more. I'm talking to my fellow Jesus people out here. Second thing that it says is love others deeply. Love others deeply. Third thing, be hospitable. Be hospitable. I think this is a lost art, dude. We have such a closed door culture nowadays. Like, everyone locks their doors, everyone has security systems and Ring cameras, and the chances of your home getting robbed are literally 0% if you round it. legitimately 0%. And we have all of it anyways. Why? Because we're scared of CNN and Fox and the negative things they tell us because they post the one bad story. I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, so I'm going to get off my high horse for a minute, okay? But what I'm trying to elaborate to you is that hospitality is a lost cause right now, at least. We don't want to invite people in. We don't want to answer the door when people knock. We'd rather look on our phone at the ring and see who's there and decide if we want to open it. I'm sorry, I reject that in actual Jesus' name. Like when my Aldi order shows up, I go outside to talk to them. I ask how their day's going. I do all kinds of stuff. If a Jehovah's Witness shows up to my door, I have literally invited them into my house before. I don't like why. Man, what are y'all living in fear or living in faith? Be hospitable. There's your message. Open your doors. That's what that means. Fourth thing, use your giftings to serve others. That is so anti-cultural right now. The world tells you what you're good at, promote to everybody and hope people love you. Oh, you're good at this? Make some money off it. Oh, you're good at this? Find a job and get a pension and save up and whatever. And the Bible says, oh, you think you're in the last days and you think that you need to follow this living for God mentality? No, it says use your giftings to serve others, period. And the fifth one is speak and act so that others praise God. If the way you act, the way you speak, the way you represent yourself isn't pulling other people to God, this says that in some ways you might not be doing it right. Guilty, by the way. But what does that look like for us? And are we successful in those things? But I'm going to pull my last point out of one verse. It's verse 8. It says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. Here's my point. Living for God requires loving God and loving others. I use the R word very intentionally. Living for God requires loving God and loving others. Salvation does not require this. God to love you does not require this. You to live for God does require this. Do we see the difference? Do we hear the difference? I don't want anyone to walk out of here thinking, well, if I don't do this, God doesn't love me. That's not what this says. This says if you want to live for God, you must do these things. In fact, they're the number 1 and 2 commands from Jesus himself. And we just find it in another passage here. I've always been intrigued by this verse because it's implying that us loving others actually covers something. When I think of the idea of covering something, like it's fully encompassing, like it cancels some stuff out. Like a fire, man. You throw a blanket over a fire, and what happens? The fire goes away if you do it right. And it's implying that same type of language, like it changes something. And I studied this verse actually even just today, and I think there's 2 levels to what's being implied here. The first is the entire gospel. It's that God's love for us, displayed through Jesus on the cross, is the ultimate love that covers every single sin if we believe and receive him. Every single one. We just sang that earlier, washed by the blood. But I think there's a second thing that is more tangible for us as we live here. And I would argue I've seen that it's personally true, and it's that our love for others and each other can literally cover offenses. I don't think this is just a spiritual metaphor. I think it's something we can act out here. I'm going to give you another quote by a theologian named Grudem. I think this is his last name. But it says this: love does cover a multitude of sins, both the sins of the one loving and the sins of the one who is being loved. Where love abounds in a fellowship of Christians, many small offenses, and even some large ones, are readily overlooked and forgotten. But where love is lacking, every word is viewed with suspicion, every action is liable to misunderstanding, and conflicts abound to Satan's perverse delight. Man, what do your friendships look like? Do you have friendships that look like the first half of what I just said, or the second half? Where, man, they could do something to you, but like, hey, we love each other, so I'm going to let that go. We're going to let that pass. We're going to hash it out quick. Or are you in circles where people are always at odds? Always butting heads. Always doing this, that, and the other. Let me encourage you, if you're the second one, that means you are in circles that are to Satan's delight. There have been a ton of situations in my personal life where people have offended me, done me wrong, they have hurt me, but because first I love Jesus, I'm motivated then to love them, and I naturally Like, I naturally forgive their offense without even needing them to apologize. Some of y'all are walking around right now with hurts from people that you can't do anything about because you don't have proximity to them, or maybe you're not willing to say it, or maybe you can't say it. And this is suggesting to us that love for Jesus and love for other people will naturally make those offenses fall off. Why? Why? Because if I only serve him, right, and if he's all I care about and he's all I'm looking to and my acceptance only comes from him, I won't be bothered by yours. And that's hard for some situations. That's hard for a parent. That's hard for a best friend. That's hard for X, Y, and Z. And yet the absolute truth, I'm not saying it's not easy. I'm saying it's available. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's available. You can, listen to me, you can be unoffendable in Jesus. You can be. You can be. And this makes it so, for me personally, at least, I don't hold grudges against people. I'm not bitter. I'm not resentful. My confidence, at least recently, hasn't been brutalized by someone critiquing one of the many speaking engagements I do. And trust me, they do come in. You know what I mean? And I'm not, wrecked by those things. Why? Because I'm not rooted in my ego. I'm rooted in Jesus loving me. Do we see the difference? And that's hard because words hurt. And abandonment hurts, and pain hurts, and things are real in this life, and yet God's all the more real. So I don't know what it is for you. The crazy thing about this type of love is it's just not dependent on us. So often our love of others is dependent on how they love us, how they treat us, and yet Jesus models for us love that transcends all of that. He was beaten, bruised, spit on, misunderstood, and eventually murdered, and was still able to, on the cross, say, Father, forgive them. That's the type of person I want to be. That no matter what they did to me, I can say, God, they need you. And I believe this is the type of love Peter's talking about and telling us to have. And when we offer it to other people, it changes things. So we're going to go into questions. It is 9:12, not 11. In typical Grove fashion, many of you will stay till 11. That is beautiful and fine. For those that need to go for work-related purposes or whatever, please do. No shame or anything there. Make sure you fill out all the stuff over there. All right. But here's I'll delete the third question. First two questions. In what ways are you following the world while claiming faith? Let's get honest. This is transparency time. Appropriate transparency, to be clear. Number two, how well have you been loving others, and how has that changed things in your personal life? Let's share some testimonies. All right, y'all, let's get after it.